Hello everyone again, and that's where I started with the kind of hi, hello, wherever you are joining from. This is a really tough time for India, and I want all of you to pray for not just my family but everybody's family. It's a tough time, and what humanity has taught us that this time has taught us that humanity has to make its unity vision more clearer than competing and succeeding over one another. So I wanted to put forward this message that be patient, be kind, be humane to everybody around, and help as much as possible. With that, I am here to help you with a very amazing concept that I'm going to talk about. And I'm very honored to have the first talk and the first stage for React.js case study. The title of my talk is Making Web More Native. And I would request Bhavya to, if he can share my screen presentation on the page. Let me give you a little bit of introduction while we do it, what we actually going to talk about. So I got to know about this conference like past 3 months ago, and the team Geekle has been very supportive about new ideas, new experiments that we speakers always want to do, and that's what we enjoy in the tech community. But what I actually wanted to explore was a new kind of method, a new kind of way where I can tell developers that something new, something which hasn't been too much practiced, and it's really new in terms of technology also. And one distinction that I really found that the way web and native apps are converging towards each other. Web apps are trying to become as much as native as possible, and native apps are trying to become as much as interactive as web, as open as web. So I think there is a point, an epitome where these both things converge, and that's what exactly we are going to talk about today. We'll be preferring more on the web side, and it's not going to be React all the way, but we'll be adding components from different web APIs, Chrome APIs, PW APIs. We'll talk about React.js code base also a little bit, but the main theme will be how you can make your web apps more look like native apps. So that put forward, let me actually start with a little introduction about me. My name is Aman Sharma, and as Bhavya introduced me, I am co-founder and chief technology officer at Twimbit. Twimbit is a Singapore-based research company. We are trying to create a new community, a new open source platform for research, where anybody can discover any research insights and experts can portray their thought leadership at a single place. We are trying to create a platform where we can connect experts from different domains and people like us who are very interested in finding new insights for their startups, for their college projects, for their business, for making decisions. So check out twimbit.com for that. Apart from there, I'm also an open source community evangelist. I work with different open source organizations like AMP, Chrome Labs, Indian Web Community, and Mobile Web Dev is a community that I myself founded, and I'm also a lead at there. And apart from there, I'm an entrepreneur. I love mentoring students, and also I love advising startups. I'm onboarded as a startup advisor to various startups. If you want to connect and talk more about the stuff that I do, make sure you connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn using the handle AmanTech. And you can see the nerdy stuff I'm into, so I won't actually bore you or kind of flatter myself more on these things, but you can see how much nerdy I am. I'm really sorry I'm not having any other talents than this, and this is like my bread and butter now. So with this, let's see what we are going to cover in this today's presentation. So basically the whole talk is divided into four main sections. The why part, why actually we are talking about what we are going to talk, and why the strategies that I'm going to discuss are important. Then we are going to talk about the process involved in making sure what I'm talking about, how you can actually execute it. We are going to see an approach. But well, before that, let me wear my nerdy glasses so that I can see clearly and also look cool. So the third one is approach. So how you can actually start diving into it and how developers can adopt these methodologies. And finally, a follow-up of how some of the conclusions, some of the things that I have missed in the other sections. And I'm really a little bit of nervous right now because this is a new kind of format. So pardon me if I'm not 100% with the flow. So I want to start with the dilemma that always people have. Like you want to launch your web app or mobile app, and you are always confused with it. And the dilemma is basically about your digital positioning. Should you go using web sites, or should you go with native apps? Because website provide you more coverage and more reach, but on the other hand, native apps have more features, more performance, and it's more intuitive. On the downside, the plus points of both of these things act as negative points as well. Web is light to bake and it's also agile, but at the same time, native apps take huge times of development cycle. Huge updates needs to be built, and people need to manually install these updates. And also the installation hurdle that people have. Sometimes you are not signed in with Google Play Store, or you are using an operating system that doesn't support that native app. So the implementation of this business logic always becomes stuck. Well, if that was the case, this conversation was already ripped apart and we wouldn't be talking about this today. But why we are actually here is to see a new strategy where we can combine both of these strategies, combine the goodness of web apps and native apps, and also some of the functionalities from the cross-platform environment, whether it's be desktop applications or Chrome OS applications, of how we can combine the goodness of all these things and merge them into one single thing that is called PWA. When I got to know first about PWA, I was so mind blown that how cool it is that you can have the capabilities of native apps while having the reach of web apps, and that's what progressive web apps actually stands for. So you're progressing a normal website into a native apps. That's why the name progressive web apps comes into picture. To start with, the whole life cycle of transformation of your normal websites to a native apps is divided into four main parts. And the first step, of course, begin with making sure that your website already is performing in terms of aesthetically, as a, what do you say, in terms of mobile responsiveness or single page experience, like SPA frameworks, like if you can use React state management or React routing or different SPA frameworks that you want to use. And also these web pages are already performant. They are providing as near experience as a native app inside the browser. There are not huge load delays, and the content is client side rendered instead of server side rendered. So with that cycle covered up, we'll not be going through that part because you guys are already very professional at creating websites. We'll be jumping into the second section, that is how to create a basic PWA. And the main things that are involved in creation of basic PWA is the manifest file and the service worker file. So let's dive directly into it. And the whole process of creating a simple PWA is actually divided into just 4 steps. The first step is enable HTTPS, which I think almost everybody is used today. So actually issuing yourself a wildcard or a free SSL certificate is also totally fine. It's just to make sure that some of the APIs that PWA will use over the time, it requires a secure encrypted access. So make sure that your website is HTTPS first. The second section is to create and set up a manifest file. So what do you need to do? You need to create a JSON file like this one, in which you will write the name of your app and different icons that you want to use, the start URL of your app, what background color, the theme scoping, and all this. So this is a standard layout of what things you should include in creating a standard PWA. And then you will add a link between this file and your actual index.html file. So whatever the index.html launching file you have for your application, just add this line so that the browser knows what file it needs to read to recognize that your application is actually a PWA. The third most important step is to configure and set up a service worker. You can simply start with the service worker, but wait, let's first understand what actually a service worker does. So basically a service worker is nothing but a bunch of JavaScript code, and what it is actually doing is that it's trying to intercept every network request and trying to define if it should fetch it from an actual server or should it return the results from cache. And this is very much helpful when you are trying to run your application offline. So one of the main aspect of a native app is when it makes a network call, it caches all the content offline on the device. And this is done using the native APIs. But on PWA, we will use service worker to do the same functionalities. More about service worker in the upcoming slides. And the last step is testing your PWA. For testing your PWA, there is no better tool than using Chrome and the built-in Lighthouse functionality. It tells you about different things that you can improve to make your PWA even better. To tear down into a more, what do you say, granular manner, these are the different sections that we just discussed. The first one was the manifest, which defines the prompt, display mode, different things that are more aesthetics about your progressive web app. The second section is the front end, which is the actual client side code which users interact with. Then we talked about service worker, which is basically the caching logic and how you are going to deliver the content to the users. And then the API, how your app or the PWA interacts with various operating system or hardware capabilities. And also, if you want to add some extra functionalities like access to gyro sensor or accelerometer, you can use the hardware sensor API as well. Then you have cache, which actually stores the content for offline, and background sync, which periodically checks the content from your main server to feed it directly to the users. So to define it into a more dominant way, like how you can actually execute in a real world scenario, we'll go to the step 3, which is adding more functionalities. All of what we discussed in our previous slide, we'll try to conquer this one by one, and I'll be introducing you some more new techniques and new APIs that you can use to incorporate these functionalities into your own PWA. So after the second part is done, you have created your normal functioning PWA with a simple service worker which just serves and caches few of the files. You are going ahead with the third step, that is adding more functionalities. And for this, the whole approach is divided into these parts. We'll be talking about the placement, how you can place your PWA, how you can make your PWA immersive, how you can control the different activity side of your app, and how you can access different APIs, and finally, how you can make your PWA offline. So these are the different approach, and we'll be going into one by one to discover more about them. The first one, placement. Placement is how people discover your PWA. Whenever somebody visits your URL, which is probably through maybe social media share or Google search, how you can prompt the user to actually navigate and discover the content in your PWA and even install your PWA. So this is our first section. PWA installation works using prompts. You will see these prompts like plus install button on desktop browsers, or on mobile, you will see this bottom navigation ribbon that occurs on the home screen. What basically happens is that whenever a browser intercepts a manifest file, it automatically triggers this event, and it takes like 3 to 4 seconds. It just doesn't does instantly, but you can customize this thing as well. From Chrome 90 onwards, they have added a new 2 meta description tags that are called description and screenshot, where you can give a cool effect instead of just adding a simple ribbon. And you can add the screenshots, as you can see over here, and also a bunch of descriptions, so that a person can make a very good decision before actually making the installation happen. So this can improve and increase the installation rate by a huge number. In case you are wondering that what you can do with iOS, because prompts are only supported by default by Chrome browsers and Firefox browsers. So also at the same time, the JavaScript function triggers a before install prompt, and you can add your custom functionalities by capturing this prompt event. You can add different ways to install it, like adding it to the left navigation bar, adding it as a prompt in the main section, or adding it as a top ribbon. And you can also customize the functionality of how you want the person to behave when he discovers this prompt. For example, on iOS, you would like to use for the person to actually click on this button and then click on add to home screen to actually activate the PWA. It's a little bit of hassle, but you can tie some kind of rewards when a person does this to make sure that the users installs your PWA. To see a simple code how you can create your own custom install, so firstly what we have to do is that we have to listen to the before install prompt event. Then we have to save this event and then trigger our own flow. Once the PWA is installable, then trigger back to our analytics service wherever we want to listen to what if this activity actually happened. In the code base, you can see we have actually added an event listener, that is before install prompt, and then we create our own trigger flow, which is adding a prevent default, which is if the person has already installed the PWA, it shouldn't trigger him again. And if it hasn't installed, then do a show install promotions. It is totally customizable, and you can follow up, and I will be sharing new resources also of how you can make it more interesting. Another point to discover over here is using is one important function that is called get install related apps. Sometimes a person has already installed a native app in his phone, and in that case, you don't want the person to again get a promotion. So in that case, you would like the person to directly navigate to the app. You can do this by using the get install related apps API function. In your PWA itself, you have to define the scope called as related apps, which is, and then define the web app or the URL that you are trying to point. So what this is basically going to do is, as soon as a person's come on a website, you will automatically be redirected to the app that you want to redirect to. Also, you can centralize some notifications, and instead of sending different notifications on the let's say the native app on the PWA, you can centralize the whole experience and don't make yourself look like stupid. So also not add more bothering prompt. So make sure that you use this function as well. The second part is immersion. Immersion is defined as the experience when the person forgets about what is real and what is virtual. But wait, actually in our case, it's what's web and what is native. So we'll try to use these practices in which how much we can make the person feel so much immersed that he doesn't spot any difference between what is a web app and what is a native app. To start with, you have to use the display mode. Display mode in manifest file is defined as the way you want to represent your app. There are 4 different ways to display your content in the PWA section. One is the full screen mode where you don't display any navigation button. In standalone, you do display navigation button. In minimal UI, you display the navigation button and the address bar with couple of forward and backward buttons. And in browser, you are trying to provide the same experience as the browser. By default, the browser is the default display mode, and you have seen like if somebody adds a manual app, it's open just in browser, so it's nothing different than a bookmark. And you can customize it using this display standalone property. For some browsers, these display modes are not supported, and to have a fallback method, you can use the display override property, in which it will respect the display first, but if it doesn't occurs, then it will respect the fallback. In this case, that is the minimal. Another important thing is how people actually discover when they go into the app browser and discover your app. For many years, PWA has been culprit of differentiation between what is a native app and web app because of the iconography. So you can see if you upload an icon, it will be always surrounded with this white box. Well, not anymore. You can use the maskable.app editor in which you can import your own icon and then generate a PWA compatible adaptive icon, which will be performing good whenever the maskable icon set is on. So that when the users use his own custom icons, whether it is round, teardrop, square, whatever he wants to use, your PWA icon exactly looks fabulous and exactly like how you want to use it. You can also use the property called as purpose maskable, which allows the browsers to actually notice an operating system will be able to mask the PNG icon whenever the person using a different theme system. Native apps have a very good feature that you can use the app shortcuts. For example, I use Paytm a lot, and I don't want to go through Paytm and click on the QR code and then enter into the QR code screen. So for that, Paytm created a very easy shortcut in which I can launch the QR code directly. Well, in PWA also, you can use the same functionality, which is known as app shortcut. You can define some top level navigations like home, timeline, recent, and also a direct function like search. If you want to perform certain actions like a data entry task, if you are creating a to-do app for sake, you can directly do it using these app shortcuts. And guess what? App shortcuts are also compatible with voice assistant like Siri and OK Google. So if you define OK Google and your app shortcut name, your PWA can trigger the same action as well. To implement app shortcuts, it's very, very easy. In your app.manifest file, you have to just add these shortcut icons. And you have to define what is the name of your shortcut, what would be the short name which appears in the menu dropdown, what description, what this shortcut will be doing, and the URL that you want to prompt as soon as somebody clicks on that action button. You can also add custom icons like how you want to differentiate different app shortcuts. So make sure you try this one out also, because this is the best feature so far that I have experienced that differentiate between a PWA and a native app. Also, app shortcut works on desktop, iOS, and different operating systems as well. Another important property for a native app is the badging. The count button that you usually see over WhatsApp or email helps you recognize that how many notifications or what activity you have received after you have exited the app. In PWA also, you can use the same functionality. This can be done using the navigator.set app badge counter in this case. So for example, we have created a const which is called unread count, and you can add any number. You can actually create a service worker which fetches the content from the server. And then you can use the navigator.set app badge and add a try catch statement and then do something with your code over here. When you want to, if the person has addressed the notification, you would like to clear up these badge numbers, and you can do that using the navigation.clear app badge function. And badging works perfectly well with periodic background sync and web push API, which we'll be discussing in the next section. You would also like to display user certain kind of notification when the app is running in the background. You don't want users to always come into your website and then discover a content. And you can do this using the service worker web push notification function. For this, we'll use the service worker registration.show notification API, and it has basically two different strings that pass through this function, which is title and options. And in title, you have to define the metas like this, in which you define your body type, what you are going to display in the text, what icons you want to display. Even if you want to add certain vibrations, so you can convert your notification into a vibratable, touch feedback. And even if you want to add a ringtone, you can do that too. You have to add a tag, which helps the operating system decide what kind of notification this is. And then finally, what actions you want to define, like yes, no, and these actions can be transformed into a outputable activity inside your PWA. Well, these are amazing options. And before researching for this presentation, I never knew before that these things are even possible in PWA. Another important thing is the activity. When a person uses your PWA, how much functionally he thinks the whole application is. Native apps are amazing at it, because once you are in the native app, the UI is flawless. Even if you're offline, the UI will move like butter. Can you do the same thing with the PWA? Yes, you can. In every browser, there is something called as app shell and content module. In single page application, this is inherited by default. So basically the components or the UI layer that you are defining is the application shell. Basically the UI, the home screen, the different navigation bars, the side navigation bar, and things like that. And these are something that repeats itself again and again. And the other part is content. For example, if you have a music app, then the music inside will be the actual content. SPA frameworks are amazing at it, because when you generate a SPA code, it just creates a standalone client-side, code, which it's nothing but a minified version of all the code that you were running before. And for PWA, this is like a dream come true. You can cache all these different functionalities, and user can come back to again and again in this application shell without even needing to connect to the internet again. You can also use the properties such as a very small functionalities that I have displayed over here, that is called user select none. One thing that native app never does is that if you try to select a text, it will never get highlighted or selected. And you can do this in the PWA as well, so that if a person accidentally click on a text, he doesn't select cells. And you can use the CSS property user select none to perform this functionality. Also, you can use font family system UI, which automatically detects the UI font, whatever the UI is going to use, and your PWA can use the same font. So this kind of makes the app indistinguishable from the operating system environment and making it look more native. There is a trend these days, and we are thinking in our company also to add a dark mode. But how you should actually add a dark mode depends upon the user itself. If he's preferring to use the dark mode in his whole operating system, then you should totally respect that decision as well. And if he wants to use the light mode, well, that's okay with him too. Sometimes dark mode and light mode shift dynamically depending upon the time of the day. So you can achieve this using the property called as window.matchMedia, and then prefer color scheme property. So prefer color scheme property returns you the value light or dark depending upon what theme the operating system is actually using. And then you can apply your own media queries to actually apply the same function. Finally, we are on almost the last part of our presentation, that is API. API help your PWA or your web app to connect with native services, different APIs that the operating system has to offer, and even the hardware, sensors, and different properties. So let's see what are the different APIs available and how you can use them. The first and the most important is the Web Share API. Web Share API helps your app to share content on other apps. So for example, if your app is a music player, you can share that music or the link of the music on WhatsApp or different apps. For this, you can use the navigator.share property and then add things like title, text, and URL, which are basically the content that you want to share. You can also add a try catch to see if this is successfully fired or you want to fire it again. If you want to share files, then that is possible as well. For example, if your app is PWA like Instagram, so as soon as you publish a story, you want person to be able to share that story on different platform as well. You can use the same navigator.share API, and instead of adding the file location, the URL that we added in the last example. Instead of that, you have to use the files array property. So after you do this, the API will be able to share the files into whatever destination you want to point. On the other hand, if you want your PWA to receive data from the other apps, for example, somebody wants to share a photograph and he should be able to share that photograph inside your PWA, you can do that as well using the web share target API. And this is defined using a manifest property known as share target. So in your manifest file, define a share target, add an action that what you would like the person to, what function you would like to trigger when the person hits this target, and then what method this function would be, get or post, depending upon your requirement, and what different parameters you want to get from the destination. You can also make it configurable to use post commands, for example. So for the destination can be sending a post request from a multi-part form data, and you can process that as well. The next and amazing features that I always love is the media session API. Media session API helps you to display a player on the top of your navigation bar or even in the lock screen. You can do that by using the navigator.media session property. And then you have a bunch of different properties available under this API. You can customize what the metadata.title looks like, what the artist name is. You can also define the cursor position, what is the progress of the current playback media. And also you can add a, artwork of the playback media. It can be video as well. So you can add the PNG or the thumbnail of that image. And this automatically gets adaptable according to the operating system. Then you can also add bunch of different actions that you want to point to, and then add an event handler for these actions as well. And you would like at some point to actually access the native file of the operating system, whether it is the desktop app or the mobile app. For example, if you're trying to create, let's say, a social media app, you would like the person to be able to pick up a file from his native app. You can do that using the window.show open file picker API. And then when you get the return property, the native path, which is the local file path for that file, you can take that file property and then you can process it in the way you want. File system access API is wonderful if you want to create dynamic functionalities. One of the important things that always native apps are good at is working offline. Even a person is in a plane or in an environment where there is no internet, the app still functions. Well, you can use the same property in your PWA as well, so that the user feels just fine, even if there is no internet. So in this portion, we'll discuss about these functionalities, like how you can make your PWA even more, offline capable. So remember the app shell cache property that we were discussing before. This is the exact portion where I explain you technically how you can implement that portion. So in your service worker itself, you have to define the files to cache in object in which you add different bunch of files and their path. You can directly add the static path in this case or the SRC path in this case if you are exporting build on client SPA from React. So then you can add a service worker, which is our install service worker, and ask the browser to actually cache all these files that we have just written. A good practice here is to also include an offline.html page, which will tell the browser what to do if the person is not online and you don't have a cached content. Instead of displaying this favorite dinosaur that we usually see in the Chrome browser, we can actually create a cool game, or even let the person see some beautiful code and give him a JavaScript functionality that reconnect after the internet is back on. This can be achieved by using this constant that is called constant.offline URL and then defining your offline file. Also, if you want to make your other content make available offline for the browser or the PWA, you can use the content indexing API. Just like in Spotify or YouTube, you can create offline version of videos so that you can watch them when you are not connected. This API functionality helps you achieving exactly that. So as an overview, what you are trying to do is basically use this index property in the registration portion of your navigator.service worker, and then add all the indexing content that you want to index. Once you have indexed the content in your UI layer, you can use the registration.index.getAll property to return back all the content that you have ever cached. So this is amazing if you want to create an offline capable PWA and doesn't want the person to manually, check the internet again. So make sure you check the content indexing API as well. If you don't want to do the clockwork yourself by creating a service worker that is this much messy, you can simply use the Workbox, which has inbuilt APIs for caching up any extension format. For example, in this example, you can see we have made a Workbox worker, which is whenever it sees a .mp4 file, it caches it, so that the person doesn't need to go to the internet again and again if he's playing playback his favorite romantic song, let's say. So you can do that using the Workbox inbuilt. This is actually a polyfill. So even if some browser doesn't has a functionality, you can add the service worker functionality in them as well. So make sure you check out Workbox in case you don't want to go through your own JavaScript writing versions of creating media available offline. Finally, the native apps, one of the property that PWA never were able to achieve was the periodic background sync. Sometimes you are not attending the app for even weeks and months, but the app is still constantly sending you notifications or even performing the functions. You don't need to open the app again and again to do that. This is called the background activity of an app. Native developer would be always already knowing that this is so easy to achieve because of the background app activity cycle of native app. Well, now you can achieve the same functionality in PWA as well. Using the periodic background sync API, you can trigger some task for a regular interval or a specific time and ask it to do some set of a task. For example, getting new content or refreshing the notification feed. This is actually divided into two main things, that is registering the periodic sync and then responding to it. So registration can be done easily, again using your navigator.service worker API and then telling it that your API is ready. Then you can define and register your periodic sync using this minimum interval time property. And then automatically, whenever this time interval happens, it can trigger the function that you define. For this example, we have defined the function content sync, which should trigger at exactly, I think this is 1 hour every day. So this is the minimum interval that we have defined. So then you can add an event listener for periodic sync and then trigger whatever desired application code you want to. Finally, we are done with like amazing APIs that we discovered. But the fourth and the most important point is, even if you want your PWA to be listed in Play Store, well, you can do that as well. There is a Chrome project known as TWA, Trusted Web Activity, which is basically a parent activity to PWA. You are defining a trusted encryption type to your PWA package so that it can be published into Play Store. You can use the bubble wrap CLI, which is just three CLI commands for you to generate your own Android app from any PWA. Again, remember, I'm not talking about wrapping your website into an app layer, which is actually the web view. This is actually conversion of your web code into a operating system runnable code. And you can achieve that using these three commands. First of all, you give the manifest file, which has all the API access that you want to do, and then finally build it. And you have the .apk file that you can then upload to the Play Store. Also, if you are super lazy like me, you can go to PWA Builder, in which you just need to enter the manifest file of your website and it automatically converts your already ready PWA into a native app. So make sure that you check out that as well. Finally, the sad part is not all operating systems are made equal. Everybody is different. And the most two important operating system that we have, Chrome and iOS, the web browsers we have, Chrome and Safari in this case, are not having the same equivalent preferences for PWA. So this is a small example of what are the things that you can do on Chrome PWAs, but you can't do on Safari PWA. So check what your use case are, and if those use cases fulfill any of these API functionalities that you want to use, I think PWA is a go-to thing that you should do. Finally, if you want to check out more content, you can always go to web.dev and check out their PWA section, where they have bunch of different web practices and different code examples so that you can start becoming a PWA pro developer. If you really enjoyed the presentation, you know where to connect me and thank me. And also, I would be looking forward towards your feedback. It was wonderful talking over here. Thanks for your interest. See you next time.
Thanks a lot, Aman. That was a wonderful session indeed. And without a doubt, the audience had a
Bhavya,
great.
I think I can't hear you.